Hello and welcome to BIM XT Network. My name is Dana DeFilippi, coming to you from my home office in Northern Virginia. For those of you that do not know me, I'm a BIM technologist at Smith Group, advisor for the Revit DC user group, and speaker at national BIM conferences. 5 user groups along the East Coast have come together to bring you the BIM XT Network. The network is run by a board of advisors to help guide the meetings. Our hope is to provide a live forum for people to share and connect on processes and tools related to building modeling. As a side note, these meetings are recorded and provided online for the review in the future. Today's topic is BIM data and facilities management. First, we will hear from Craig Dubler, Associate Director of Facilities with Penn State. Craig will discuss innovation in facilities data management. Next up, we have Melanie Stone, Cloud Storage Administrator with JLL. She will explain the owner side as she discusses the data that goes into facilities management and how they prepare it for owner stakeholders to use. Today, we will have each presenter go over about 20-minute presentation, and we will have about a 20-minute discussion afterwards where we would like to hear from you, the participants. One of our common responses from our surveys is that the discussion is one of the best things, so make sure that you chat with us. We definitely want this to be a conversation with not only our presenters, but with you, the participants today. We do plan to offer these once a month, as we have been, for at least the remainder of the year. We do hope to see you live in person at our city-based user group meetings, eventually, some point in the future. You are the audience and the participants, so thank you for being part of the conversation today about BIM data and facilities management. Once again, today we have up Craig Dubler. Hey, Craig, how's it going? And I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, it
Awesome.
Doesn't happen often. Thank you.
I know the feeling. How have you been spending your time during the pandemic? You've been at home, been back at work yet?
It's a busy time for facility directors, I can tell you that. So.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, right? Things that typically us architects and engineers don't even think about.
Yep, so Penn State is back in session. In-person classes is an option, but there's a big discrepancy between students, faculty, staff, and other auxiliary options. So there's a plethora of just options that I have to know about of who's working from home and potentially in person.
I feel like we could have an hour conversation just about that. That brings up so many questions that I want to have. But I know that you have a wonderful presentation for today, so I'll let you throw that up there without further ado.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dana. Thanks, everybody who's able to join today. As Dana mentioned, I'm Craig Dubler, the Associate Director of Facilities for the College of Engineering at Penn State. Prior to that, I was the BIM Director for the university and was heavily involved in implementing what Penn State does from the BIM side. So what I want to talk about today is specific to BIM for FM and really hone in on how to provide what the owners need from a data and information perspective. Not what they want, but what they actually need and how to even discover that. So I will be monitoring the chat too, so I'll do my best. If there's any questions, feel free. I do like the idea of having, a discussion. So if there's any questions I can answer throughout my presentation, I'd be happy to do so. So I talked a little bit about myself. I don't like to do it often, but just to tell you, I have a pretty well-rounded background. I was part of the BIM Execution Planning Guide that was derived from Penn State research. I worked in DC construction area for 5 years after my undergraduate degree, came back for my PhD. And that's when I started getting into BIM and how we can do things better. So I think throughout my career, how I was successful, or I think how people are successful, is just saying there's got to be a better way. And, my research has kind of led to that. And it was helpful with what previous research was done, but just saying there's got to be a better way has led to the implementation of lean in construction. It's led to the development of integrated project delivery. It's led to the develop and the influence of BIM, what we're here to talk about. And hopefully, people saying there's got to be a better way of doing things, or this just doesn't work, will leading to the future of BIM for FM. We're going to be talking about the tip of the iceberg now, but more robotics, automation. I'm really excited to be involved in where we're at for an industry. But paying homage to the studies that have come before us. If you haven't heard these, great. It's new to you. If you have, I'm sorry, it's a refresher. But Paul Teichholz out of Stanford looked at the construction industry in the early 60s all the way up to 2000s, and we just weren't keeping up with manufacturing. Whether you agree, with the numbers or not, I don't think that's important. But we know that construction was not as efficient as manufacturing, and that's actually led to a lot of lean and IPD studies. And then in the early 2000s, Patrick McLeamy out of HOK looked at, this what's known as the McLeamy curve. Curve number 4. If we start making decisions earlier on in the design process, it actually costs less and adds more value. So we should integrate it as a team. Led to more design build, led to more integrated project delivery, as well as started this idea of sharing information with teams. So final study I just want to chat about is NIST in 2004. They talked about the cost of interoperability, or just not sharing information on our projects. And that cost the industry an exorbitant amount of money, just us being siloed. And this has really led to a lot of BIM research. And I know at Penn State, we were able to get a pretty decent grant with helping to try to solve this problem with interoperability from the BIM execution planning guide. At the same time, how can we do it from a Penn State owner perspective? So what is BIM for facility owners? So I'm going to put my owner hat on. At Penn State, if I'm getting a project delivered to me, what do I expect? And believe it or not, I don't care a lot about the models. Only where it adds value. So BIM to me is information management. So how can I get the information I need to continue being successful in facilities, or maybe look at increasing my options or my interoperabilities or information that is available to me and taking advantage of it. So what types of information are available to me as a facility manager slash owner? Well, there are models, and there's a purpose for that. I'm not saying there's not a purpose, but sometimes we put a pretty good value to models where it might be too complex for some owners. It definitely provides wayfinding, or it provides, where things are, or maybe components, as built conditions, record model conditions. But there's also the most important thing to us is the data, that comes out of that. And I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but that's what I, tend to care about is, okay, what can I pull from these models? What about that air handling unit is important for me to maintain it? What is important to me about the space where I can operate it? At the same time, over building in general, where I can look at security, safety options. We also have to pay homage to the stuff we forget about, right? They're still drawings, and we're still using drawings, so we can't forget that that's still important to a lot of owners. And I'd probably say just as important as data is documents. So I can do this export of a large amount of data, but if you give me an O&M document that has the information in it, and I can get that in the field to my technicians, that's extremely important. And I just don't want to forget about that from a turnover standpoint. And last but not least, it does get overlooked a lot, but there's so much knowledge that's produced on our design and construction projects that just doesn't get turned over. So how can we do that in a better fashion, where we take advantage of the vendors, the subcontractors' knowledge from an installation standpoint, and turn that over to the owner? So I've presented this around the country, but it's the idea that I have for maximizing the benefits of BIM for FM. So if every project knew this, and it didn't really matter what your owner was, if you just got to know your owner, what they cared about, and what you could do from a facilities management, these are kind of the keys that I came up with. So first is begin with the end in mind. So just think about the owner, just get to understand them, what information they actually care about, how they want it delivered. Collaborate effectively, so actually come up with a plan to do that. That plan will be extremely overwhelming at first. So have the ability to actually break down that plan and focus on key turnovers. So I think that's kind of a missing part that we had when we put the BIM execution plan together at Penn State is it was overwhelming. It was this 20-page document. Okay, we have a plan. But if you couldn't break it down and you couldn't actually deliver certain things, I think it got overwhelming, and it doesn't mean that you could actually execute that plan. So if you focus on turnovers, that's a key to execution. So the idea of beginning with the end in mind, just some questions to ask any owners, in my opinion, is, what's the purpose of the facility? Why is this even being built? Who's the stakeholders that are attached to this project? Who's going to occupy, operate, and maintain? That may be one entity, that may be 3 entities, but then that there may be 3 people from a stakeholder perspective that are going to be requesting information at turnover. Once you do know who those stakeholders are, what information do they need to do their jobs effectively? That can be difficult because they may get overwhelmed by the terms of models. Hey, what would you do with a model? But maybe just ask simply, what information do you need to do your job right now and in the future? Who's going to maintain the information? So I truly believe that information, if it's not maintained, it becomes legacy information. It will become obsolete at some point in time. So if an owner's not going to maintain it, be careful of how much effort you put into it. But if you do know somebody's going to maintain it, those are the stakeholders you want to get a hold of, because they will be able to speak intelligently to how they want that information organized, when they want it delivered, and what they need. So not overwhelming, but just important to Penn State's success of facilities management using information. So taking one more step into, and we had this kind of conversation before we got on, is we tend to think of facilities management in general fashion. We think of operations and maintenance, we think of space management, but in these large campus projects, or these large campus owners or multi-facility owners, facilities management is a business, and it has all the parts and pieces of the business. So certain people might care about different things. So I think it's a good example. Michael Thoreau talked about the FN wheel, and I think it's a good example, because when we talk about operations and maintenance and the value stream that we're delivering on projects for operations and maintenance with this data, it is only one slice of the pie. So you can see why, it may be important for owners, but it's one part and piece to the success of facilities management. However, I'll throw up a couple of examples here of where we've seen success in BIM for facilities management at Penn State. First and foremost is just on our projects. We do model walkthroughs, and we request model walkthroughs. This is a picture of a department head for chemistry, and he's looking through at the Whitmore building on campus. This lovely lady here in red is the super TA for chemistry. I can't make that up. She's in charge of all the TAs, and she's actually called the super TA. So those two specifically were really good stakeholders just to look at the facility. Who you can't see in the picture, who always sits in the back, is actually our maintenance technicians. We also invite them to all of our model reviews so they can see what's important to the department heads, the TAs, the occupants, but then we reverse the situation. We start going over some other areas like the basement, or the mechanical spaces, the electrical spaces, and the department head and the super TA got to see what was important to the maintenance crew. So I'll show you what this looks like. So this is our Whitmore project. We took a Revit model, exported it into Autodesk, and turned it into Unity. So we took it from Revit into Unity, and then basically put some displays on top of it. So we turned it into a Unity model that you could walk around. So we could go on the roof, look at the height of our exhaust fans for this facility, talk a lot about safety with our technicians to be able to access that space, maintain it. We can go into a lab fairly quickly, and we learned, this is in design development, that this cabinet can't be here, as well as we may want to actually look at where this fume hood is located or relocate these fume hoods, because the TA, when this TA stands here, they have to watch potentially two different areas of students. So they can't see the whole way down the table. So from a wayfinding perspective, we can see that. We also look at the basement And I don't know why we always put MEP spaces in the basement, but it just so happens. You know, we could do a walkthrough of the basement and just look at where, sorry, it's been a while since I got to walk through this model. I lost my edge. But anyways, we can walk through the basement and get to see, you know, some parts and pieces that are important, you know, to the technicians. We can see, you know, their rooms, what kind of equipment they have in their space, you know, how the layout of the area is going to be, where they need to, you know, access and get through certain filter changes and equipment. You know, this is an example of a heat exchanger. This is a air handling unit space with a heat exchanger. We have an avatar here, you know, where we can walk around and start looking at some ergonomic features to make sure that they're safe when they're doing their maintenance. And like I said before, we also kept the TA and the department head as part of these reviews, just so they could see what it takes to actually operate and maintain their facilities. So I think they both learn a lot in these, we call them virtual walkthroughs, schematic design, design development, and one prior to bid, just to make sure we captured all of the changes necessary. This is a slideshow so Keith asked about Unity. I'll send you a link to the Penn State has a script of how to take it from Revit to Unity. Pretty much it is free to take it into Unity, yeah, I can definitely share that link after this, and it's fairly straightforward. Depends what you want to do from a finishes perspective and a lighting perspective. You can spend a lot of time doing that, but if you're just looking at space and wayfinding, it's pretty quick. So FAM programs, this is the technology side of FM at Penn State, and this just shows you the plethora of systems that is actually used as an owner. So we have Abacus, which is our financial system. Docfinity is our document management system, legacy documents. LionSpace FIS is our space management system. ArcGIS is our utilities mapping, you know, done in GIS. Maximo is our IBM Maximo is our asset management tool. And Tririga and eBuilder, now it's just eBuilder, is our PMIS, Project Management Information System. And this just kind of gives you the, you know, the same thing as a project, you know, how we have to get these systems to work together. As a company, these large owners, you know, have the same IT infrastructure, and a lot of it is integrated. So it's not as easy sometimes as just sharing model information, but we have to focus on what part and piece do we want to integrate to facilities management. So here's a quick snapshot of just asset management at Penn State. So if I was to kind of say BIM at Penn State, what we focused on is we focused on getting data in the technician's hands. So this was an iPod Touch at one point in time. Now they have iPhone, I think they have iPhone 11s now, where they have a pretty decent screen, but they can carry them in their pouches. And they have access to O&M manuals. They have access to Maximo to actually record information. They have barcoding where they can get that asset information and make decisions in the field, and they have access to the model. So to get there, we had to obviously collaborate effectively. So each of our projects, we develop a BIM plan to make sure that happens. This is a 4-step process to develop a BIM plan. I do strongly urge that each of your projects have a decent BIM plan. One, to determine what you're going to do on a project, but specifically where you're going to deliver at the end of the project.
And like I think that's probably what most of us think about when we think about Penn State, right? Is the PXP or the BIM execution, the BEP or whatever anybody wants to call it, right? I feel like whenever you look up BIM execution plan, you're going to find resources related to Penn State.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, and we're always trying to sharpen that too. So if there's something you found with the BIM PXP that you like or something you want changed, you know, there's a website, bim.psu.edu. I have it in my references at the end. I would love to hear more collaboration on that, or things that we want to change with it, or some keys to success so we can make it better for the industry. Yeah, thanks, Dana. And then finally, the key to success is focusing on turnovers. And this is kind of exciting, but at least to me. But once we found out that, okay, we know what data we want at the end of the day, and when we can put together in Revit, you know, a list, or at least either families, common families for certain types of pieces of equipment, or we can just do shared parameters, with different asset types. We can then deliver that and start requesting information at different phases of the project. So when I say focus on deliverable, we just contractually obligate design entities at the end of the day to get to a certain amount of information or legacy information about that piece of equipment. And then design to construction, we determined, and this is a very difficult decision for us, but not to keep it in the model, but to pull it out in Excel, because it was easier for the contractors to not fill out Revit information in the field. It was easier to keep it in Excel where they could actually put construction information, so O&M information, or I'm sorry, submittal information, as well as installation information, barcode our equipment when it's being installed, and just completely filling out this, for us for when we're thinking about asset management. And that was a big, tough thing for us, because we always wanted to stay in the model. We said the model is it, it's where it is, but at the end of the day, it didn't really matter if it was in Excel or it was in the model. It just cared that we got it organized correctly and that the information was filled out the way we needed it. So once again, getting the owners what they need. And then we had to take that information and pull it into Maximo. So you might have heard of Kobe. It would be great if Kobe was aligned. And Kobe is great, has opportunities, as well as, if the software is perfectly in line with the owner's recommendations. If their owner's recommendation changes, or if the software may not accept Kobe the way it's defined, you have to kind of do a manual manipulation of that data. So unfortunately we did, because a lot of our asset parameters were set up in a different way from a legacy perspective. So we kind of had to define our own information structure. But we take that data, import it into Maximo, attach O&M manuals, which is probably even more important than a lot of that data, and it gets maintained within Maximo from an asset management and a maintenance perspective. So, that's kind of Penn State in a nutshell, what we're doing from BIM for FM. I guess I would say if you had an owner that didn't know what they wanted, these are some questions I would probably ask them, and I'll share these slides. But, just trying to help turn over some rocks, whether they have any BIM standards or what existing systems or softwares do you have, what decisions or who makes your decisions, who's the most important thing. Good question. So Heather asked, do I have any idea the percentage of responsibility of who's filling out that asset information? It's about 25% designer, 75% contractor. As a matter of fact, we also have the contractor validate the information that's in design through the submittal phase too. So that's part of the process.
So a lot of times probably it's the designer who's actually just putting the line item there,
Yep.
and then the contractor who's filling out the data.
That's right. So we ask the design team to fill out design intent information, right? So capacities and things that really why we're designing it, or to the level of design intent. And then the contractors are filling out submittal/installation information. I'm trying to generalize a little bit, but Magdalena asked about more details about Revit models with Maximo. Yeah, so we took Maximo, kind of reverse engineer it, like these are the specifications for each asset classification, turned those into either shared parameters or Revit families, and we published those on bim.psu.edu or opp.bim.psu.edu for our design teams or contractor teams to take those and import them into the either Revit, or they have it as Excel. They can fill out an Excel template with those data. As long as we don't change the column names, it actually works pretty well. If we do, we have to do a little bit of quality control to make sure that happens. My time's almost up here, so I'll just kind of wrap this up and show you some links. So, I think just the key takeaways. The owner needs to be involved, with your project anyway. You should really push for an owner representative to make BIM decisions. You're going to, as a team member, increase your capabilities as you move forward or along with projects. What I'd ask is, not to overcomplicate things and try to push the model to owners that don't need it. Some owners may still be using or just getting up to speed with CAD, on their CAFM systems or space management / asset management, and their systems may not even accept it. So that model is just going to sit there and rot. We don't want that as an industry either. So don't overcomplicate it. Understand, the purpose of the data. Make sure there is a purpose. If not, it shouldn't be there. And our models should be much simpler. Like I said, these are the references that I talked about. I'll make sure I put one in here too for BIM to Unity, Revit to Unity. There is a good link for that that the Penn State researcher put together. And last but not least, if you're interested in kind of joining the movement either from BIM to FM or just the national BIM standard, I sit on the board of directors for NIBS, Building Smart Alliance, and they're currently going through the National BIM Standard version 4. They're soliciting members to be part of the work group, and I know Nick, he can share a link here to that if anybody is interested in joining it. You do have to be a Building Smart member to volunteer. I think it's approximately $100 a year to be a Building Smart member, but they are looking at for people to help with these work groups. And I have a link for each of these work groups if you want to see anything more. For example, the core BIM requirements, I think that's a really good work group, but they're looking at defining what if we were to give an owner any bit of information, if we said BIM for an owner, this is just the core things that you have to do to say that you're doing BIM on your project. So it's just a core BIM work group, and I think it's exciting to start aligning some things that I think the UK has already done really well. Yes, thank you. So TJ said the NIBS, Building Smart Alliance is now NIBS BIM Council. Yes, we did go through a renaming of that. So thanks TJ for defining that. Yep. So you have to become a member of NIBS to support it. So that's my time. Thank you, and I'll stick around for the discussion later on.
Thank you so much, Craig. That was so useful. And I feel like, with Penn State, like I mentioned earlier, even when I got out of school and I was like, what's a BIM execution plan? And like legitimately Googling it, finding all those resources with Penn State. I know you guys have been in the BIM world for a long time. So what would you say is maybe next in terms of facilities management and data and that whole movement? Where do you see it going? Obviously you guys are on the brink of a lot of new technologies with Unity and all of that. So what's maybe in the forefront?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We went pretty quickly, and I'm just being completely honest here. We went pretty quickly from Penn State to getting pretty intelligent about BIM, and we probably surpassed, some of our stakeholders, space management, and document management, how they're organized. So we're actually kind of going a little bit back to the basics and making sure that our organization structure is defined correctly. So when we provide this information to design and construction, that it makes sense and that it can be achievable. I think we did a decent job in asset management, but we as owners have to make this simple and make sure that our organization is working together.
And I feel like
we're not siloed.
What NIBS is the goal, one of the main goals of NIBS and Building Smart and trying to define those standards.
I would love for everything for Penn State to not have a standard and we could just use the NIBS standard or any BIM standard, or even plug and play where we can say, hey, reference this standard and here's additional requirements for Penn State. And that would be great, where we don't have to keep it up to date.
Looks like we're missing a conversation over here, Craig. Let's see you moving over to it. So I'll let you take that one.
I see a couple here.
So from Dan Warren, it looks like how would you recommend smaller building owners that don't necessarily have the upfront resources?
Yeah, and I would take advantage of your needs within a project basis. So, I've talked to a lot of smaller building owners that say, okay, well, what can we take advantage of while the project's in place, while we have, very confident designers and contractors to do at least virtual model reviews where we get what we need, from an architecture MEP standpoint, and maybe get a very simple, and a lot of contractors can produce a very simple record model with attached information. It doesn't have to be complex, but things that you can use down the road, you know, a very simple legacy model to use in operations, or at least refer to when you need help defining what a part and piece is or other operation needs.
Awesome. Well, thank
That's
you so much, Craig.
Minimum BIM. Yeah, thank
and
you.
We'll definitely, of course, have a conversation later, so we look forward to that. Before we transfer over to Melanie, it looks like you guys are essentially saying the same things, right? Prioritizing the most, you know, important things within what you need for FM. Before I do switch over to Melanie, I kind of want to launch this poll about what industry you as an individual, as a participant, are a part of. We'll give you guys a minute or so to answer this, just so that we can get a little bit of a better perspective as we move forward. Maybe ask a few more pertinent polls here. We're at about 65% voted. Give it another second here. All right, awesome. So we'll share the results there. So of course, what we typically expect is primarily architect, designer, but of course a lot of engineers, contractors, a lot of owner FM. So that's really fantastic. And we would love to hear in the chat, if you put other, what that other is. So if you wouldn't mind, we would love to hear that. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Melanie. So Melanie is calling today. Can you hear us, Melanie?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. How are you today?
Oh, just ducky. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. So Melanie is the cloud storage administrator with JLL. How have you been spending your time during quarantine, Melanie?
As was already stated earlier, it is a very busy time for facilities, so I've just been pretty much working nonstop.
Absolutely. I completely can understand that. All right. Well, I know you have a lot to talk about, so much good information with facilities management, so I will not keep you up from that.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Melanie, but nobody ever remembers that. So I go by Mistress of the Darkness because nobody forgets that. So I've been working in facilities since 2000. I worked directly for 2 facilities and then moved to the consulting side. And since then, I've helped dozens of facilities with their post-occupancy data management, both in implementation and support. And I've been a huge fan of BIM. Ever since I saw Revit demoed at Autodesk University a few years ago, and I was just waiting until they came out with MEP, because I didn't really care about the architectural portion for facilities, because I can go look at the wall. I was more interested in MEP. So if we can move on to the next slide. So projects have a beginning and an end, and I'm really thrilled that we have so many owners here today. Typically, I don't really see that when I give presentations, so I'm super excited about that. But reminding the rest of the people that facilities is constant. It's the circle of life. It's building handover, operations, renovations. It just goes around and around and never really stops. When I talk about facility management and what we need, everyone always gets derailed talking about, oh, you should really put it in the contract or the specs. Hot tip, it's in the contract, it's in the specs, so we're not going to talk about that. We'll just move on. So facilities, everyone's like, what do you need as your deliverable? And we're like, whatever you have. Give us everything. We will figure out what to do with it. We will figure out how to make it play nice and give our stakeholders what they need. So this could be CAD files, it could be Revit models, it could be tabular data, maybe it's Excel or an export from Derofus, or anything else you've connected your Revit model to on the design side. Operations manuals could be PDF or paper, whatever. I've even had deliverables of scans and videos, something that shows us what's above the ceiling or what's below the ground before things get sealed up. Provides a lot of great perspective, and we definitely put that in with our project archive. And then on the next slide, we can see where our data goes. Now, we just saw that the great diagram there from Penn State about all the different systems they use and how they're interacting with one another, and they trade data back and forth. So other teams aren't going to have Revit. So the facility subject matter expert may have to distribute a CAD file, or maybe they have their archive, they've got their patchwork quilt put together, and maybe that's still a CAD file because they don't have the funds to turn it into a Revit model yet, or it's a low priority area. So they're going to take information from the model and they're going to put it into the CAD file and distribute it to the other teams that need it. I personally haven't seen anybody sharing Revit models with stakeholders. It's always been exported out to some other format, but I'm sure there's some facility out there who is doing that. So we also export to the tabular data, PDF, images, the CAFM, CMMS, and IWMS, like spoke about in the previous presentation, Tririga, Maximo, ArcGIS, Archibus, FM Systems, Manhattan. Like there's so many different programs that are going to eventually receive data that started out in this model or the other deliverables. We also make reports. Those could come out of a CAFM system, or we could be manually tabulating them, or they could come out from some other specialized homegrown thing that we've built, or we've built a connector from our CAFM system or our model that speaks to another program or spits out a report. A lot of it could just be done, information we convey in just presentations. When we speak to the other stakeholders, we're trying to give them information just the way they need it, or data exchange. That's, I just said the live connectors that will transfer data between the programs. Right, next slide, please. So this is an approximation based on the facilities that I've worked for. You know, most of the teams that I've spoken to about BIM standards are only thinking about project management and maybe the occupants, the owners or the occupant rep who is saying this is how we use our space. So the project teams have that in mind, but those are not the people who are going to be touching the deliverables. They don't care about those deliverables, they just care about the space that gets built out. Or they care about getting the project closed out so finance gets off their back. Who really touches this stuff over and over again is going to be completely other departments. Yes, I've got design team and PMs in there in the middle because at the beginning of the next project or the end of this one, yeah, there's going to be some back and forth with those datas, but they're not the primary users of this over the life cycle. I've tried to break down a little bit here. So the left-hand column, this is the owner. The left-hand column would be people that you might interact with from the design side. You know, company leadership, the finance reps, real estate doing portfolio planning or managing the leases, the people managing the projects, and that special occupant who can speak with you about how they'll use the space. In the middle is the core group, your facilities people, operations. But on the other hand, these are all those teams that you may not know about. You're never going to interact with them. They depend on the facility manager to tell the design team and to put in the specs what they need. Or the facilities figures out what they need and makes sure that it's going to be somewhere in there. And I did leave a couple off of here, I think, conference room scheduling and hot desking. People might think space and occupancy management for that, but for those, I think it's really more important for security and housekeeping, because if you're doing conference room scheduling, you need to know who to let into the building, when to clean the rooms, and same for hot desking. You need IT to set up those spaces, you need finance to charge back the spaces to the departments who use them, and housekeeping, of course, to clean spaces that may not be used every single day. So there are a massive amount of stakeholders that are never going to touch the design team, and they don't need to. They're all going to go through facilities or whoever is that subject matter expert. That could be a BIM manager, it could be a CAD coordinator, it could be the facility manager or an occupancy manager, but there's typically going to be one core group that's really responsible as a touch point to receive new drawings and distribute the existing ones for the next renovation. And they're going to take care of all these people on the back end that need things from them off and on. So thank you for listening. I always love talking about facilities, and I'm really thrilled to be on here because obviously I've referenced Penn State a ton over the years, and very excited about the BIM standards. But if anybody just wants to see random facilities topics, whether it's related to CAD, BIM, databases, reporting, whatever, the Augie forums has a sub-forum called Facilities Management in Practice. And those, it's not a super active forum, but whatever discussions are in there, they age well, because we always face the same, you know, issues over and over again. So I would encourage anybody to read the topics in there if they want to learn more or post questions. Thank you.
And I will say also that Melanie has a wonderful blog that she shares some really wonderful content in facilities management as well. So you can check her out. Once again, Mistress of Darkness, easy to find. Or of course, just Melanie Stone, if you can remember that, right, Melanie?
If you can.
So thank you. Craig, Melanie, do you guys have anything else, maybe based off of your presentations that maybe got you thinking about some other things, or conversation that, you know, based off of the likeness of your presentations, I should say?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, we didn't coordinate anything ahead of time, and it was really impressive to see how her presentation matched and aligned with mine. So nice to know we don't have to argue that we're not on the same page, Melanie, so that's great.
Agreed. I also appreciate that you had all the complex diagrams that I didn't have time to make.
Awesome.
So it looks like Damien is an electrician project manager, and he is actually asking you guys, would you recommend going for additional Revit and CAD 3D training? Right, it's a kind of a tough question, because it really depends on, one, what type of data are you getting? Are you getting the Revit model? Are you getting the CAD, right? I'll let you guys go from there. It's a tough one.
So for me, I've just learned on the job as I needed to. So I could open a model, and then once I'm in that model, I'm like, okay, how do I purge? I go Google, how do I purge? And then I find the plugin, here's a video on how to use it. So for me, it was so piecemeal that I didn't go through a formal training or have a manual. I just sort of learned on the job.
Well, and it is probably very focused in terms, you're not having to get in there and draw walls and start new projects and things like that. It's you almost need a Revit for FM course. So I know Linda was mentioned in there. I would probably say that there may be some courses from the client owner perspective, FM perspective, that might say, this is how you just get in there and view a model, select elements. And, you know, even from, you know, a project architect or someone higher up on the team that isn't in Revit all the time, that needs to just go in and view things and, you know, mosey around. But of course, Google, like Melanie said, is always a wonderful resource. YouTube videos, all of that is free, right? So
yeah, I would also say, you know, it depends on who you buy your software through. You know, I would go back to them as a rep and ask if they offer additional training, because sometimes they can even come on site and help you out. I know we've done that and helped even some of our local consultants. You know, at Penn State, State College is kind of a niche market, so we kind of wanted to build our local consultants up, and we offered even, you know, training on site at Penn State to help out with that.
Another question here. Looks like Sonia is asking, do you typically use Dynamo for Revit to speed up data import export tasks? Or any other tools, right? Maybe not Dynamo. There's all different types of ways to export data from Revit.
I've really wanted to dive into that myself. Like, I know there's so many different things you can use, but for me, my focus in recent years has really been on the CAFM IWMS side, you know, supporting the database behind that. So really, I'm just pulling the data into that database and manipulating it there. So I haven't really had the opportunity to dig into Dynamo because I hadn't had the need yet.
Yeah, we tend to export before, you know, a lot of our data gets inputted from the contractor. So it's usually an Excel at that point in time, spreadsheet more than a database. But I could see the need, you know, if you want to move things back and forth for using a Dynamo.
Yeah, and I will say maybe it kind of ties back to the NIBS and the Building Smart kind of initiatives of what is it that you're asking for? What is it that you're receiving from the design side of things? And how do we manage that rather than I don't want to necessarily call it a free-for-all, but you having to go in there and ask for this data and get it manually, which is an awesome thing to be able to know how to do. I'm not discouraging that at all, but developing a standard so that you have the data in a manageable, usable way, like Melanie is saying, in those different systems that you're already using.
Yeah, we use it's a good point. We use a model checker too for just QC, of our data. And I think that's probably more important than even export options, is just to make sure that you don't have any blank fields and your characters are correct. And, we do a lot of model checking, just to make sure that's accurate. And we use Excel model checker for that.
And I know that also, oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
I was just going to throw out that I think Dynamo could probably be a really good option for people who don't have that enterprise system set up, because it's a much lower barrier to entry, right? Mm-hmm. Like Archibus and Maximo, those are really expensive programs to implement. So for those small and mid-sized facilities, yeah, I would love to see somebody exploring that and sharing how it's working with them, because it would be a lot easier for your average FM to do that than to try and get funding for a CAFM system that the organization may not see value in.
Absolutely. And if, somebody knowledgeable enough that, could write these types of scripts were to be able to go in, you could almost develop a standard so that you're asking for the same data from every model, right? And maybe even build in a few variables so that, for slightly different project types or slightly different campuses, slightly different buildings, whatever it might be, you may be able to alter those data retrieval points within the Dynamo script. Also, Ideate has BIM Link, which I'm sure is much less expensive than some of the FM tools that you guys are referencing. Has a wonderful way of exporting data. In terms of the model checker and as well as the Revit courses, I know CAD Micro, who sponsors this event, does offer a lot of those different tools. So I would definitely go to their website, check out what different products and services they offer, because they definitely can help you along those ways as well. Different tools and different things that can definitely help you in terms of setting standards and those types of maintenance tasks, right? Like I said, being able to go in and retrieve the same type of data over and over rather than having to recreate the reel every time that you're getting a model, right? So, or recreate a schedule, even in Revit, which sometimes can be very daunting for a new Revit user, I know. So, absolutely. Let's see here, going through the questions. Do you guys have any other, Melanie, where maybe do you see the industry going in terms of FM, data, BIM?
I'm just excited in recent years about how well we've been equipping mobile workers. Our facilities guys used to have to run across campuses all day long, but if they can have a tablet because there's now Wi-Fi. More consumer level data collection, if you can take a photo of something and upload it to your CAFM system, if you can take a bunch of pictures and turn it into a rough model, just with a piece of equipment you're already familiar with. The scanning has gotten so much cheaper and easier to use to scan existing facilities if you don't already have a model or a drawing of it. So I just think that those things getting progressively easier to use and progressively cheaper makes them a lot more accessible to facility owners. So personally, that's the thing I'm most excited about.
Awesome.
I do have one caveat with scanning facilities. Something we learned the hard way is to make sure that you have the same organization scan and produce the model off of that scan, because they'll know how to scan, how they want it organized and set them up that way. Because we did, a couple of examples like, hey, give us the point clouds, and we can share, and either we can model and, oh, we need more. Okay, go back. Oh, we need more scans. So I think that's a good thing to keep under one roof. If you do decide to scan as an owner or even as a company, to build it in-house. I think we're seeing more and more of that, which is exciting.
I am a firm believer, going back to the BIM execution plan, that if you are going to contract out any type of Revit work, especially a survey or scan to BIM type of workflow, that you should definitely have a BIM execution plan of sorts. Look into level of accuracy, all of those different checkpoints. But yes, I think that going with one firm or maybe having a handful of firms that you work with that you're comfortable with is a great idea. And I know that there are quite a few out there, especially now with that technology really on the rise. And I would say that in terms of FM, that's one thing that really fascinates me, right? I would say when, kind of as Melanie was suggesting before, when they go in and they're scanning, before the slab is poured, before the JIP is put up, so you're able to see all of those systems. You as a facilities manager could walk through with your HoloLens almost and be like seeing through the walls like Superman, right? And I think that would be so cool. I mean, like if you had a leak, you could really understand very quickly where all of that is coming from, and be able to exclusively nail that down in a very, very quick way, and probably save tons of money in that regard, especially like Melanie was saying, with it, when you have a concrete slab involved, right, where you're having to drill anything. Definitely would love to have something that tells me where all of that stuff is, right? Now, in terms of Penn State, I would assume that you guys have some really old data as well, right? I mean, you guys have been around for a really long time. You guys have been using BIM for a really long time. But how was that integration process, right? I would say that that's probably one of the harder things for, maybe like the question before, some of the smaller campuses who are trying to get into the BIM for FM, smaller universities, what have you. It seems like such a huge step. You already have all of these, even, the wheel of data that you were showing of all of the different systems and, all those different data points. It seems kind of overwhelming. So
I'll let you guys in on a little secret, when the key was separating the data from the model, right? Because the data is updated in our systems, asset management, space management. Once that's separated, and even CAD plans, CAD plans are updated in our space management system from a space perspective. My secret is that our models, we don't have the capacity to keep all of our legacy models updated. So we strip them down, make them of a record model, for basically architecture only. We do have some MEP systems in there, some of our major components. If something changes on a large project, we will redo that section of the model, but it has to be a pretty substantial retrofit to redo our models. I've seen Western Michigan, they've had some good examples of how to keep their models up to date, but it is potentially unsustainable. Nothing against them, and they've admitted it, with the amount of, you need to have a whole CAD group, or a whole Revit user group within your organization to keep them up and live. Mm-hmm. And it's just something that we had to do the value stream on that. Was it worth it for us to keep it? Was Russ Manning, one of our previous BIM managers, would always say, is the juice worth the squeeze? And unfortunately, it just wasn't for that.
Well, I know Melanie and I have had separate conversations about digital twins and, other things where, I mean, I know you say as built to an architect and engineer, we're like, no, don't do that to us. So what is the value? I mean, do you guys request as built? I would assume that you do. And, I guess you would ask then, how pertinent is that as built if you're not maintaining it to a certain level?
I think asking for I think the preferred term is record drawing, so nobody tries to throw a lawyer at me. I think the thing with that is, like we just stated, we're stripping down the model to just what we need and then updating that thing that we need. So whether we move a piece of ductwork or a branch, or we walk through and our maintenance guys notice, oh, that's not what it says on the blueprint, let me make a napkin sketch. Ideally, we're getting those napkin sketches and we're making the updates. I wouldn't be going back and updating a schedule. I wouldn't be updating the length of the pipe run or the materials used or adding sections and details. I would just be updating like the basic size of it. Or when I change walls in a Revit model, I just change the wall. I don't go in and look at the family type and see what it's composed of. So like the basic structure is going to be there, the basic components are going to be there. It's just not going to be done to the precise level of detail that we originally received.
Right, okay. So we do have a few questions here. We actually have Adam Ridge. Adam, can you hear us? Hopefully Nick is in the background doing his awesome. Awesome. Hey, Adam, where are you coming from today?
Raleigh, North Carolina.
Welcome, welcome. So what's your question for our guys today?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, with all this new technology and this new development with BIM for FM, which areas are you seeing the largest return on investment, and what areas, did anything surprise you now that you have all this data? Were there areas that you're seeing return on investment that you didn't anticipate when you went into it?
I can start, Melanie, if you want. So, one of the objectives we had at Penn State was becoming more efficient in maintenance, and reducing through attrition, the size of our maintenance technician group. And just being honest, we had to get more efficient. We never knew what from an education facility what was going to come. And we've actually done that. Our preventative maintenance has increased, our corrective maintenance has decreased, which means that we're analyzing our assets and we're seeing return on that investment to the point where we're staying ahead of our maintenance requirements, and systems aren't failing where we have to correct them. That was pretty surprising how quickly that started to occur because technicians bought into it. Nobody lost their jobs, but they saw where areas where we were inefficient, they didn't have the information they needed to do their jobs. They were excited and bought into, this entire, I won't say necessarily technology, but more in lines of information at their fingertips. When you put a model in front of them, they get a little bit overwhelmed, but give them an O&M manual and data that they can use, and they'll go crazy. They'll do whatever for you.
I definitely agree with that. I think for me as a document manager first, the thing that I liked most about it was sometimes when you would get those CAD files, they would be broken down into smaller files. And then when you would put them side by side, they wouldn't line up. Or when you would be chasing, like you've got a dozen pipes going down a hallway. If you work in a medical facility, those pipes are really important and the valves are really important. So you have to make sure they're right. And when you're walking down a hall and all of a sudden the label switches from, oxygen to condensate return, like halfway down the hall, you're like, oh, great. Now you have to go get your little isolation unit, get a ladder, stick your head above the ceiling and figure out which one is actually in which place, and then go move all the labels. So also the references to sections and details, then when you flip to that because you need it for a repair and there's no correlating section or detail, like all of those little frustrations that were such a time suck that take you away from actually managing the facility or improving the older data. Yeah, that's the part that got me most excited and freed up the most amount of my time.
I want to continue the conversation, but I also want to be respectful of people's time. So we'll have some more questions live, but before we allow people to leave if they need to, which once again we want to respect, we do have a prize today, and we've decided to shift our prize from the background to actually survey participants. So we have randomly selected a past survey participant, and today Rebecca Fisher is getting a $25 Amazon gift card. So thank you, Rebecca. We really do appreciate you participating in our survey, as well as everybody else. For those of you who have to drop off, please make sure that you do fill out our survey. We do really, truly value those. And as well as you may win a prize next time, because that's where we're going to shift our movement for the prizes. So thank you so much. Thank you, Melanie and Craig. Thank you, everybody, for your questions today. And we will see you next month. I'm going to stay on, ask a few more questions, but thank you so much. So Heather Worrell, another Raleigh Revit user is coming from us today, has a few questions. Can you hear us, Heather? Hopefully you have a moment that you can stay on with us to ask your question. Maybe not. She may have needed to leave.
I'm here.
Oh, yes. Yay. Hey, Heather.
Sorry, I was trying to get the message across that I needed to be unmuted.
Oh, too bad
Hurry,
there wasn't
Nick,
a
hurry.
background contest. Look at that.
I know. I was like,
Sorry,
I'm gonna win
Heather.
today.
You're always a winner in my book.
All right. If you haven't seen Kipo and the Age of the Wonder Beast, I highly recommend it, just for these lumberjack cats that are behind me. My question was on the space management side, like getting to some more maybe live data, like feeding in to the management occupancy sensors, and then I started also, when I was thinking about it, like daylighting sensors, all that stuff. Are you guys seeing anywhere that is being used on your side? And even now, like with COVID, air quality sensors, all that, all that stuff, that would be really great. I would think, especially on a university side, to kind of see, how your spaces are being used, and if they can be used in a different way. Do you think it's coming? That's my other question.
Do you have an answer there, Craig?
Well, I can speak quickly to occupancy, and then probably more like, so yeah, we keep track of in our space management system, which is on a platform called Penn Bay Innovation Solutions. Specifically our use of our classrooms. We 2 years ago, we centralized general purpose classrooms and really analyzed how they're being used, specifically to the maximum occupancy. With COVID now, that's cut in, 40-person classroom fits 4 people now. So now we're looking at how we can use them for online education, joining Zoom meetings. So we've kind of put them in Zoom rooms and just making sure that they're occupied, and we do see that. But I'll probably speak more to sensor data from vibration. We've implemented a vibration sensor program, and that's been really beneficial. That kind of goes with the predictive maintenance to look in what our assets are doing, and we record a lot through Raspberry Pis, either vibration or temperature changes for bearings, motors, and we're getting that data and analyzing and putting preventative measures out ahead of time.
So I don't have an answer to that, but my coworker Alan is here, or at least he was. Is Alan still here to provide any insight? Or did he have to drop off already? I can't see.
Might have to be unmuted. What's his full name?
Alan Engel?
He does not appear to be on
We
right
don't
now.
see an
He must
Alan,
have dropped off.
unfortunately. Well, we have another question. From a facilities manager's perspective, what could a contractor or designer do to add the most value during project delivery? Coming from Todd Povell.
That's a good question. I like to hear that question. I'd probably say keep the end users involved, and that's not just the owner representative. I showed that example of doing a virtual walkthrough with our maintenance technicians and going through ladders to roofs, thinking about safety, thinking about ergonomics, show that we care about our maintenance technicians or our facility managers who usually don't get a say on these projects, and schedule that time, I think pays huge dividends. It's in design and leads to good construction.
Yeah, I was just going to point back to Craig's slide where, he talked about sit down, talk to the owner, walk through the process. And obviously that owner is not going to be necessarily the project manager or someone on the project team, but, that subject matter expert. So making sure you have a sit down conversation with them to see what they're really using it.
Well, we will go ahead and wrap up with that. Looks like that's pretty much the end of our questions, unless Craig, Melanie, you guys have anything to wrap up with? Any final thoughts? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for all of your wonderful insight, all of your wonderful information. We do greatly appreciate it. I want to also mention, please make sure you check out yourdeskuniversity.com for information about the upcoming series starting September 23rd. Tune in each Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for an engaging session on tech and the transformation of the AEC industry. Thank you all for providing feedback and asking questions, in particular Adam Ridge, Heather Worrell, Dan Warren. We really do appreciate all of you guys being part of the conversation. Once again, please do fill out the survey. We really do value that. If you have any suggestions for future presentations, any presenters that you'd like to nominate, including yourself, and any other insight that we could make this better for you as the participant. So thank you so much, and we hope to see you next month.